Hello, everybody. If you want to put on your cameras so I can see some faces, that's always fun. There we go. As always, my favorite faces. There we go. It's always the happy faces that start first. And then it goes to the grumpy face. Just kidding. So we were separated for about 5 weeks because of I had jury duty last week. So this week we are going to just catch up, and then we'll have another session or another town hall in a few weeks. So tonight we're going to kind of jump into some things. I'll just kind of jump right in here. Um, First of all, I hope everybody's well. Second of all, let's kind of go into the agenda for tonight. So I think we always try to do is we always try to address what is most urgent on our families' minds as soon as we start. So one of the things that we've been getting emails regarding the last 48 hours have been test cancellations, ACT, SAT, and I'm with you. I'm looking at the COVID numbers. I'm seeing the loosening of regulations locally, and I'm thinking, why are tests getting canceled? If anything, more tests should be being added. So I know there has been some frustration regarding this. I know that some families have, these are the things that we've heard. We've heard families saying, I have been canceled for my test, and now I'm looking in another state, or now I'm trying to find one close in California. The first thing what we would say is that we've been going through this for about, well, since the beginning of the pandemic, quite frankly. And so what we've seen are students and families being bumped around, jumped around, and they get all uptight, and they start to think it's all for nothing. But we just say, all right, take a breath. A lot of times the stuff will sort itself out as we move closer to the test. First of all, if you can get a location anywhere and you're trying to test, let me put up the calendar on the screen here. If you are trying to go for the June SAT or the June ACT or July ACT, the idea is to at least get a test center locked. If you've been bounced, we always say go back to SAT or ACT. Here, I'll bring the ACT up on my screen just so I can kind of walk us through it as I'm talking about it. This is my son's account. Don't tell him, he'll have me killed. So, all right. So, some of you guys have seen this before. So my son is set up right now for Buena Vista and Ventura County. So let's say I want to change that location, and I go here to, like, for you guys, as you're looking for June, and it says that there are seats at the Anaheim Marriott. This was not here an hour ago, literally. So this just popped up. It says a late fee applies, but if you want to go into Anaheim and test, I already see some people are scrambling and going, they're like, quick, get that before the person in the seventh box gets it.
I just I just yelled at my son, bring me my cell phone.
Yeah, Dominic, do it.
Dominic, go get my cell phone. Because we're going to Ventura too. And that Anaheim was not there.
Right. So this is proof in the pudding that sites open up as you go. So let me see if there's anything else here. So it looks like that's it, but let's pretend that the Anaheim wasn't there. So the first thing I would do is change location, and I would go to a zip code. You know, we know in Southern California, the more common places to test are Santa Barbara and San Diego. I know that there are some people on this call that are testing in San Diego, and I think it was Chris who told us that there is a discount at the Bayfront Hotel, which is where my son took his test last month. So we were there, and we stayed about 7 miles away at another hotel that was half the price. But it sounds like you had a really good discount there. So whether you put in San Diego, you put in Santa Barbara, San Bernardino. Those are the three counties that we see testing the most regularly. And as David, our prep director, filled me in this morning, not only do they have the most open seats, but they tend to wobble the least. Like you tend to have the fewest last minute cancellations in these locations. So is it a pain in the neck to drive to San Diego? I don't know. We did it and it wasn't so bad. We stayed over Friday night, went to go see San Diego State, UCSD while we were down there, made a day of it. And it wasn't that bad. Same thing with Santa Barbara. There are worse places we can go to test than those locations. You can see if there's anything in Barstow if you want. But no, just kidding, Barstow. So let's just put in, I don't know, what's the zip code for Santa Barbara. I'm just gonna say Santa Barbara zip code, just so I can kind of do this in front of you guys. Let's say 93101. So I'll go back to here. I'll put in 93101 and let me see what they have. And for June, all right, so there's one in Santa Maria. For July, it looks like there's Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, Woodland Hills, Arroyo Grande. So sometimes you have to play this little shuffle game with your zip code to see if you can get a location. But once you get a location, then you'll have what looks on my screen on your screen, which is you can have something that's further away. So for example, Redondo Union, some of you guys that go to Redondo Union just announced they're giving a free test to their students in the ACT on June 5th. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this test and we'll change location to Redondo Union because it's closer. So if you start far away, then you can always check. And if something is getting closer to your house, you can move it to that, once it appears. Like, for example, if I were testing all the way in Arizona as of now, and I saw that one popped up in, Woodland Hills, then I would just change it closer. But you can only do that if you already have a test locked. So the first thing I would encourage everybody to do is if you don't have a location at all, is try to get one. And then keep checking regularly, as we saw just today from an hour ago that Marriott popped up. So I know it's a hassle, but I will say compared to last year, yeah. So someone said they're going to Santa Barbara for the June ACT. What we saw last year were a lot of students continuously going through this and not getting to test. You guys are going to test. So there is going to be some bumps along the way, but everything just keeps opening up. Test centers are kind of appearing every other week. They may not be happening in LA. People are asking me why. And I asked my prep director why. He scoured, I scoured. We can't really seem to figure out why exactly LA and the schools are not being as open as they should be. On June 15th in Los Angeles, restaurants are going maskless. So I don't understand why, or we don't understand why tests would be so difficult, given the fact that most high schools are open 4 days a week now for the hybrid. So it is a little bit curious to us, but the thing that we're telling everybody, and let's go back to our calendar, because as you all know, our main thing is a multi-test process. It's something where we expect to take a test once or twice in the spring and once or twice in the fall. So if in the spring you're only able to take the June SAT, a lot of you are going to do the June SAT and then the August SAT and likely keep the October SAT on the back burner as an option. For those that are doing ACT, you may have done February or April, and you might do June or July, or you might do June, July, and September, whatever it might be. But if you only have one ACT or SAT in the spring, we want to just let you know that you should be prepared to take at least two in the fall, just as a hands down rule. At Blue Train, doing this for 20 years, one of the things that we have seen is that multi-tests pay dividends. Even if you stop prepping by the end of the second test and you just take the third test as a walk-in, a lot of times that score just keeps climbing. So What we don't try to do is have everybody do a ton of tutoring for the first test, try to spike the football and be done with it, because that mentality often leads to a frowny face, which we don't want to see happen. And also, the student usually ends up thinking, oh, this is how it goes, and I didn't get it, and I'm done. And meanwhile, the other students that are doing the multi test, the 2 or 3 tests, are taking it into the fall, not really doing any more prepping, not really doing any more stuff that's making them miserable, usually end up with a higher end of the day score. And as I'm going to get to in about 5 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what happened with our seniors, because we have all their results back. We're getting their surveys back, and we can kind of see who got in where and why. So a lot of families, the next thing they ask is, this is the most common question they say is, well, if I'm doing a test in the fall and I'm taking a test in September or October, will my results be back in time? And there's always these questions is, will my results be back in time to know when I can take my next test? And will my test scores be able to be sent along with my applications? So fast forwarding to what we're going to be talking about in about 20 minutes, which is the kind of summer into the fall timeline. We know that the busiest month of college applications is November. There are a few schools that have October deadlines. University of Washington, University of Florida. There's a couple of them that have that, but most of the schools are going to be November and beyond. So if we think that November 1st to November 30th is the single biggest window for application submissions for Californians, which it is, um, then we think that any of these tests will be able to go in with your application. The October 23rd ACT might have to follow, but let me show you what happens on your application. So this is my Common App, which you guys know is, or a lot of you know, some of you guys are like, the what app? The Common App is the most common app that schools use, and you will see probably, besides the UCs, probably 80 to 90% of your schools are on the Common App. Some are on another application called the Coalition, but we expect even those schools will start to kind of cross-pollinate between the two applications, so you can just choose. But everybody on this call, unless you're the one oddball, no, if you're just the one person who doesn't, you will be using the Common App. So when I'm doing the Common App, I will get to a section that says testing, right? And say ACT tests. I'll just use the ACT. I could be using the SAT. It says, how many tests do you wish to report? And I'll say, like, for now, I'm going to report 2 because, oh, so clear answer. What did I do here? 2. Okay. So now that I'm taking 2 of those, now it says number of future ACT sittings you expect. So if I'm somebody who is planning on taking the October 23rd ACT and I'm submitting my applications on November 1st, all I'm doing on the Common App is writing that I'm taking one more future test. And I would say, in this case, it would be, for this one would be October, so the scores wouldn't be in yet. Or for other schools, November or December, those are the 3 ones you'll put October, that the scores haven't been in yet, November or December. And then you will submit your application. Everything goes normally, sent to the school, and then they're processing your application. And then they get to the part where they see your testing, and it says future tests to be taken, and they see that they have not received those results yet. The admissions council is going to wait until they receive those results, because you've notified them on the application that you will be submitting scores, and they will hold any final determinations till they get these scores. I will tell you, a lot of students, even this year, the December test date, excuse my French, a lot of students call it the WTF test, lovingly. But what that means is they just walk in, they just go, you know what, mom, dad, tutor, everybody, just leave me alone. I'm just going to roll up my sleeves, go in. I'm not going to take another stinking practice test. They get almost like angry about it. But they go in, and a lot of times, because it's just like their final swing. We see a lot of students, that just take December as a last test. We see them in quite a few times jump up the last level that they've been hoping for the entire time. The ACT could be 2 or 3 points, SAT could be 150 points, depending where they are. So what those students will then do is submit those scores to the schools, as we said, and we have seen these late test scores be a game changer. Okay, so what we're trying to always do is we're trying to encourage all families to not prep, an abundance of hours so they feel like they're just going crazy, but use your hours, use your classes. Students, use your time and energy so that you feel like you are able to do a multi-test process. Yes, I wish, you guys may not believe this, but I wish everybody could be a one test tester. Like, I would rather be handling one test for everybody and everybody be happy and, we're all just like dancing all the time. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. A lot of students have first test pressure. We call it the pancake test. A lot of students will go up in one section and not another section, and they'll have to retest and try to get up the reading, which tends to lag behind for a lot of students because it's the most performance driven section. The other sections to be more skills driven. Reading is how clearly can you think, how quickly can you think, are you eliminating things based on biases and all these other things that happen on test day. So reading sometimes takes a little while to get sharpened up, but at the end, if you plan on taking 1 or 2 in the spring, 1 or 2 in the fall, you're scheduling it so that you're able to do that, you'll be fine. So what I want to do right now, because I know when I come out of the gate, I tend to talk like a Saturday morning leaf blower, just loud and annoying at you. But any questions that you might have about the testing schedule, about your own cancellations, about taking a test in any of these areas that we mentioned, like San Diego, Santa Barbara? Anybody? Just unmute your microphone and just, yeah.
Scott?
Yeah.
It's Gregory. So a question, like I thought it was unusual that went for the ACT June, July, and then nothing in August, and then September. Any bet as to whether or not they're going to open that one up? What's your gut tell you on that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. One of the things that we did expect was that they were going to keep, because last year they added a bunch of tests in the fall because they were unable to cater to everybody that wanted to test in the spring. So we saw the fall get, for the ACT, they ended up doing it 3 weekends in September, 3 weekends in October. They ended up doing it almost every weekend through the fall. Most of them got canceled, but it's where their thoughts were. So I believe that if a lot of students are left grumpy, which it sounds like might happen if they keep canceling and not opening these new locations, then they might add one in. But to your point, Greg, because we don't know this yet, it is difficult for us to kind of rely on that. But in the case where a student has to wait until September, it's not the worst case in the world. So I would probably say that sign up for June or July, and then if you have the ability to do both of those, or if you've already done April, great, and then you can wait until September. I've had two students, or we have had two students in the last 48 hours switch exams from SAT to ACT or ACT to SAT because the timeline worked better given the cancellations. I'm hoping you don't have to do that because I really like people to stick with whichever test they feel like they've measured out. But if you're pretty close and the timeline works better for one than the other, given the cancellations. But Gregory, let me ask a question. Did your test get canceled? Did your daughter's test get canceled for location for July or June?
Sorry. Yes, but no. So the February one was canceled. The April one turned out to be at the exact same time as her interview for the state science fair.
Okay. So right.
So we had to cancel.
So it's a conflict on the second one.
Yeah.
Right.
So her first test is going to be in June. That's why we were trying to think through it. So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, I have a lot of people going on vacation in the summer. And they're saying like, well, we don't want to take August because we won't be around. And I'm like, well, where are you going? Not that I don't want you to go on vacation. I'm not asking that way, but I'm saying like, where are you going? Can you test there? Oh, we're going to be away on a ship. Okay, maybe not. But if you're going to be in like Florida visiting relatives or something like that, we have, just like we've had people test all over the country recently. We've had students test while they're on vacation. We've had people prep while they're on vacation. At the end of the day, you know, we'll help you if you're stuck and you just say, you know, I have 2 phone calls tomorrow where I have just 15, 20 minutes each, just going to try to help walk people through their own thought process. So if you are feeling like my test has gotten canceled, I can't get another one, although have you tried? Because it looks like they're popping up. And if you aren't able to get one, or you have a very specific situation, just email the office and just say that you want to have a 15-minute conversation with either myself or the prep director, and we'll call you. It's free, don't worry about it. And our job is really just to make sure that we're trying to find the best path, so that, and then also to help you figure out the timeline of preparing. But someone else had a question too. I saw another hand up when I was asking about, yeah, Chris.
I was just going to say that because we are now at Anaheim, what happened to us this morning was I was going through my email and the first email said, "You're canceled." First of all, we had been at Inglewood. They canceled that, moved us to Newbury Park a couple weeks ago. Then this morning they said, "Oh, you're canceled." And then as I roll up through the next email, within 15 minutes, they rescheduled us to Anaheim. Okay. So they filled us all up there. And then, so maybe that's why they as they went through, they rolled other people and then opened it up to everybody else in the past hour.
But they auto rescheduled you?
Yes.
That's good. A lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot of times they just like push people out on a raft and say good luck.
Well, yeah, and that's what, as I started to go into the site to look for a new location, and then it popped up that we were in Anaheim. So I was like, okay, fine. Okay. So I just scheduled another one in San Diego in July just to make sure, in case June cancels too, that we have something else, and that was available. So
okay, so let's just take what Chris said there at the end as something to think about, because if you're scheduled for June, you know, we all are watching the news. It seems like things are getting better, and we expect that things shouldn't kind of be closing down the way they were last year. But if you want to be safe and it's the ACT, you might want to schedule a July test just in case you get bumped. And some students with APs, because APs this year have been bumped from the beginning of May to the end of May. And that is really encroaching upon the ACT and SAT at the beginning of June. You know, my son kind of sent out the flare today. He's like, no more, he's like, Dad, no more ACT study right now. He goes, I need to focus on my APs. And I said, what kind of man are you? No, I'm just kidding. And I said, like, that's totally fine. Do that, and as you should. But at the end of the day, if you need to cancel it completely and move it to July, we'll just reserve a July date, because you know what? We're going to use a test in the fall anyway. And if you do test in June, we'll just take the July and then change it to September. And so, like, we don't lose any money. It's kind of playing a shell game with your registrations. At the end of the day, kind of like you did, Chris, you just want to make sure that you're covered. You want to make sure that, like, Tyler, I know Tyler's excited to get in there and take that test. Yes. But at the end of the day, it's really just about, making sure that we're not having emotional ups and downs, because I feel like that's where, the parents are like, they're freaked out, the students are freaked out, and everybody gets freaked out. And there are ways just to do these little fail safes, keep check to see if there's another location, schedule multiple tests if you can. I think the SAT is a little bit harder because it's the June test and then it goes in August, but you also have August, October, November. So you still have some fall dates for the SAT. So you might be short-circuited on the front end, but you definitely have 3 in a row on the back end. And one of the things that we have noticed, this is just quick, not to say anything about, high school counselors, but I remember a few years ago, Chadwick was telling their students, never take tests back to back, because your score won't go up because you won't have improved. And the truth of the matter is that they're thinking about the ACT and SAT as a skills test. And any student who's sat for proctored exams know that it's one part skills and one part performance. You can have a day where you're moving quickly, you're going around things, you're having time to double check, and then you'll have a day where you get stuck, when you kind of lose your confidence, you kind of leave gaps and you just don't finish. And those two test scores, because you do proctored tests on 2 consecutive Saturdays, they can be 150 points difference. They can be 4 points difference on the ACT. So it has a lot to do with performance. That's why we do the performance sessions, which you guys see in your emails that are coming up. There's one next week, I think. We always will send reminders. We encourage any students that are taking the proctored exams and the real exams to attend these, because these performance, I run these myself usually. And it's really about students getting used to moving quickly, thinking under pressure, doing kind of timing drills. It's not for scores, but it's really to show them that so much of this is performance. And when students do tests that are back to back, that kind of creates a feedback loop. June and July, oh, I'm more relaxed in June because I know July is coming. In July, I learned what I did wrong in June, right? And it's not like this big gap between them. So these little tests, these May, June, June, July, September, October, October, November, all these are what we call little feedback loops. So don't stress out if you have to take, August, October, November, because that will probably be a good run for most students. Yes, we know it is a busy time in the fall, but you'll try to get ahead of that by doing a lot of stuff over the summer, which we're going to talk about soon enough. Any last questions before I move off of the test cancellation test timeline?
I just want to make a last point about the hotel discount, because that was a complete surprise.
You have to
I
call.
made a mistake in my reservation,
Mhm.
and I happened to call up to ask them to help me fix it. And I said, well, is there a different rate change because it's a different date? And they said, well, are you part of a group? And I said, maybe. And I said, do you have anything for ACT? And they said, yes. And it was a huge difference, but they
Oh,
never
good.
would have offered it. You had to ask. And I called another hotel, the Marriott, for another place you're staying, and they didn't have it. So if you're making a reservation where they're giving the test, you have to ask.
Yeah, that's a great point, and thank you for that. So we stayed in a slightly rattier hotel for our way to do it. So good job on you for saying that. The Bayfront's nice, and actually the organization there was pretty good too. So you'll like it, Tyler, if you have to test down there. So let's talk about our seniors. I don't want to take too long on this because this conversation will spread throughout the entire application process, like what we learned, how to help you guys kind of, use that information to do better on your own application. So basically what happened this year, you've heard us talk about there were more applications. You've seen the news, you've heard about the UCs and their lack of test scores, and how there's kind of been a redistribution of acceptances all across California. So where more competitive high schools might have grabbed a few more slots, that really didn't happen this year. So you had students, and is it fair? In some ways it's probably fair, but some ways, some schools are probably puffing up GPAs. There's all different things that we can look at. But one thing I realized is that that test scores did matter. Looking through the survey, the first question we asked everyone, did you submit test scores, and for which schools? So the first thing we're doing is we're tracking their survey. We say, all right, they applied to University of Washington with test scores, even if the school is test optional, and they applied to LMU with test scores, blah, blah, blah. And there was even if the student was only, and I'll kind of make this point here, if you go to the blue list and you pick any school, just kind of stop on one. So Tulane, right? So actually Tulane was a tough one this year for a lot of kids. But say we look at this range here, of these two, of the ACT and the SAT. You probably heard me say this before. These are, can't grab them. These are the center 50th percentiles. That means that for the ACT, 25% of students scored below a 30 and 25% scored above a 33. So that's your center cut. Same thing with the SAT scores. So in this case, we say, and this is a competitive school, so these numbers are high, don't get scared, but the 25% mark is a 30 for this school, Tulane. So if you get over that 25% mark, we saw an improved chance of your being accepted to that school. By the fact of a lot of students didn't submit scores, it actually improved students' chances a lot compared to in previous years. You wanted to be for a school, you wanted to be in like the 50 to 80% because you want to be like helping their numbers increase. But this year we saw just as long as you were in the historical margin of of their acceptances, that you had a better chance. So that was the first thing we noticed. The second thing we noticed was the UCs were really pretty tough on majors. So a lot of students were saying pre-med or engineering or comp sci, and we were moving students from computer science to data science because it's easier to get in. We're moving students from like biology to health sciences because it's easier to get in. So there was a lot of kind of shuffling around of majors. And this wasn't just for the UCs, this is for a lot of the private schools as well. It's always scary. And we'll talk more in detail about that once we get to the application season, because the way we do these town halls, the way we try to bring you guys through this process is not, just taking a dump truck of information and landing on your head. Because if we went over all the major stuff right now, you would go over our heads because we're not invested in that moment right now. But needless to say, when you start to pick your majors, which is going to be August, September, around there, we're really going to be encouraging people to be picking majors that match their academic profile that they're presenting to the school. And also, if it's an impacted major, like engineering, like architecture, like nursing, to make sure with your reach schools that you're not putting yourself out of the game. Because if I am trying to apply to, UC Berkeley, and I'm already below the numbers and I pick engineering, that's going to, probably put me further from the possibility. But just to show you how weird it was this year, we had a student get accepted to UC Berkeley and not get into any other UC. So he got rejected from Santa Cruz, but he got into Berkeley. So that's how upside down things were. I mean, that's an extreme example. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we're really going to be promoting is being aware of your majors. Also, when you're applying to schools, we're going to have to be wise about, making sure we're covered on our safe schools and our target schools, because we really don't know how much things are going to shift back to normal this year. Because there were a lot of gap year students that popped in this year, and reapplied. There were a lot of students who normally wouldn't apply because of their ACT and SAT scores weren't competitive, and they just threw their application into the mix. And the schools were doing a lot of affirmative action, even though they wouldn't call it that, but they were, taking students from all different areas just so they could kind of, fill out their geographic diversity. Like UCs were doing that. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo was really aggressive with that. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that everyone has an abundance of options at the end of the day, and also options that you can afford, because a lot of families kind of look at the hard schools to get into or the UCs, and they think that's the way it's got to be. It's either we're going to pay for this school that's amazing, that's be a dream come true, or we want a UC, which is one of the best school systems in America, but we want to make sure it's a good one. But a lot of students really also are going to end up applying to out-of-state publics and out-of-state privates and in-state privates and publics too. And when you start to target those for scholarships, the University of Georgia is offering me $25,000 a year. That's getting pretty close to the price of a UC. Or UW is offering me $17,000 a year. That's getting pretty close price to the close. Again, blooper. That's getting pretty close to the price of a UC. So when it gets, when we start doing the applications and the college list building, we really want to make sure that families are not being narrow-minded in terms of where they're applying, but being more broad so that they can, have a bigger net without adding too much work on their backs. And we'll talk about that, as we go through the process. But the lessons learned were also that qualitative elements of the application were very important. Like, what do you do in your free time outside of school? And how can you, when you are, when you are thinking about, your activities and whatnot, how can you make what you do every day seem like something that is enriching you? Whether that's watching movies, whether that's cooking, whether that's playing video games, whether it's editing, whether it's taking care of animals, whether it's taking care of your grandparents or your little brother and sister. All those things, if they're written well, will be impactful components of your application. And I've said this in the past, this is the time to invest. The students always like this part. This is the, time to invest in your kids, not just in the traditional way of like, yes, we will send you to, an enrichment course at, Brown University, or we will pay for you to do a youth leadership conference at USC. But, the student that wants to learn about outer space, maybe invest in a telescope. Like what I did with my son, as you can see, as his instruments are here. I know that if I try to like bribe him, like, hey buddy, if you do well, I'll get you a drum set. I know that he'll be like, Dad, that's lame. I would never do that. You're lame. And like the whole thing just backfires in my face. So what I did was I was like, I know he likes music, right? I know it's a part of him and it's part of what he is. So he just walked in and he walked in his room and I bought him I put a drum set in there, like one that he can put on earphones. Like, don't worry, I'm not crazy. But at the end of the day, now it's something that he can invest himself into something else, and that'll go on his application, like teaching himself instruments. And because I know that that's his thing, and I'm not telling people to spend money, but if you and your parents think that there's something that you can do that requires a modest investment and that will lead to enriching hours that you can talk about in your application. For some people, it's like I said, it's buying an SLR camera because they want to do photography instead of using their iPhone. For some people, it's buying the components to build a computer because they want to be going to computer engineering. For some people, it's buying a software program to learn how to do architecture. For some people, it's buying a corpse because they want to be, no, just kidding. That was a little dark there. We'll edit that out. No, we won't. But nonetheless, I really think it's important that we do think of our children and their interests as a dynamic component to the application. And if we can feed those, the better our application is going to look for it. I don't see him on the call today, but I had a good conversation with a student yesterday who was talking about skateboarding during COVID. And he's like, yeah. And I go, dude, I had a student write an amazing, short essay, an amazing long essay, activities, all about skateboarding. And his mom at first thought it was like, and then this kid started to think about it. And then he was like, oh, maybe I can do something with my app to track. And like, I don't want to say exactly what he said, but because it's his thing, but he then was merging two of his interests together. And when we get to application season and we're filling in those boxes of, your, what did you do last summer? Or what is your favorite activity? Or just like your hierarchy of your UC activities where you put them in order. All these things will start to be treasures that you will be, putting into your application. Too many families ask us what looks good on an application. Like they want us to point to a class that the student can take or a like internship the student can. Those things are great. But I've told everyone, one of our students that did fantastic this past year, his internship was with his father in his bedroom. His dad was making phone calls to his patients and he was just like sitting there listening. And he wrote great essays about this. And he wrote all of his activities, added this in, internship with Dr. Dad. At the end of the day, a lot of these activities aren't how they look as resume points, but how the student can talk about them. So qualitative elements, having a more broad college list, targeting schools that aren't just like the usual suspects and finding good ones, you know, and also understanding that the numbers are going to be a little bit wobbly, and also not short circuiting yourself on your test scores. You know, you hear students are going test optional, but if you're going to, you know, I told my son, I go, buddy, like there's going to come a time in April next year when we're going to be looking at your college choices that you have, and a good portion of that's going to be determined where you get money from. Um, because obviously college is very expensive. And we also know that a lot of these schools will give money for test scores. So, and it doesn't have to be a perfect test score. It just has to be a test score that means something to that school, because it will lift their numbers. So if the school's average is between a 22 and a 25, and you get a 26, you know, that school is going to want to throw money at you. So all those things are going to be important. But let's jump into got about 15 minutes left here. Let's jump into the timeline of the summer. So where am I here? So you know, planning for the summer. You know, a lot of you guys have called up and have you know, asked about the workshops, or actually have signed up for the workshops. And this isn't, you know, a sales pitch. It is just about telling you guys the easiest way we can move 200 to 300 students through a process professionally, keeping all their applications, you know, tight and polished, while also saving families money and not doing everything in a very handholdy way that breaks the bank. It's the workshops. You know, the families, you know, will look at this kind of timeline here. You know, July is for building college lists and starting personal statements. August is for doing online applications and finishing those personal statements and essays. And then we'll get to October, November, September in a bit. But so in the beginning of building your college list and starting your personal statements, in the workshops, the most popular one is the personal statement workshop. A lot of you guys already signed up. I think our June 23rd one is almost full. But we want those students in June that are doing this workshop to start writing their essay fairly soon after that. We don't want you doing this workshop and then starting to write your essay in August, because then what are you doing? I mean, you lose all the momentum you get from the workshop. And second of all, one of the best things families can do is kind of understand that once we head back to school, and a lot of schools start in late August, so your summer is between, you know, the end of June to like the mid-August, and that can be done in two ways. One way is a student can be like completely disconnected and just try to catch up on everything in the fall. And the other way is a student tries to get ahead and tries to get, and I'll say this is your kind of your primary target, to get your college list completed, to get your long form personal statement, which is your big essay that goes on the Common App, the Coalition app. It's about a single page. And next town hall, we're going to read some of the winners of our essay competition. We'll talk more about the essay and college list building, because those are the first two things. That's what we're going to kind of groom you guys into. But if you're able to get your personal statement done, your UC Insight questions, which are 4, they're about half page each. You pick 4 out of 8, and your college list. So your essays and your college list and your online applications. If you get all those done, the only thing you'll have left to do is write your supplemental essays in the fall, and that's a really good place to be. The number one, you know, like the exit survey I said that we have our students doing right now, the number one question we ask them is, do you have any advice that you would give to, you know, students that are going through this? The number one thing that they all say is start your essays earlier, because they all realize that that the essays are the biggest part, the biggest pain in the neck of the college process. You know, they are. A lot of people grump and groan about the SAT and ACT. Fair enough, but it's really the and the APs, but really it's the essays that if you just clocked the amount of hours and time that students kind of put into the process, that is the biggest one there. And writing is not something that you can just do quickly. Even if you're a great writer, then you should do it quickly, and then you should polish it and polish it again. We will say the essays that we see where students take the time and they do their applications from beginning to end, they care about it, and they kind of rewrite things, and they're tinkering with things, they're adjusting things. A well-loved application goes further. There's no doubt about it. And you can't have like a crammed love affair with your applications in 2 weeks in the fall, because it's not going to work. You're going to write essays that just probably sound more cliche than you realize. You're going to probably not be writing your activities with the flourish that they deserve. You're probably not going to take enough time and do a college list that actually, explores all the different parts of what you want. Um, so those things are really handled pretty quickly. Not, in the workshop. So the personal statement workshop, the first one that the students do, is just 3.5 hours where we kind of do some writing. We do a lot of reading, discussion, some brainstorming. Most students come into this workshop having zero idea what they're going to write their essay on. Most leave knowing what they're going to write their essay on, and they have some clay to work with, and they have a lot of understanding of the creative pathways that they can take. Then the writing labs, because a lot of people have confusion about what these are. These are, you can take one of your package hours and just trade it in for a 3-hour writing lab. And what that is we have, whether we do it in person or, online, it's one part students, accountability, working on their own. And the other part is, an essay specialist comes in and says, all right, Lauren, what do you got? All right, what are you working on? They spend about a half hour, and then Lauren goes back to work, and then the essay specialist goes to someone else. And, we have, for every 2 to 3 students, we have an essay specialist. So there'll be like 5 essay specialists working one writing lab with 15 students. They're just jumping around. Students have said that they really like this for 2 reasons. One, because they could forget about their essays for the rest of the week, and they could just go in on that, Tuesday or Wednesday and just super focus and get something done. They feel like they're moving forward. They are getting organized, because one thing that we try to have everybody do is we try to get all of our essay prompts together so that we understand everything we need to do from the beginning. And we're not just trying to like write an essay and then, 10 days later go, oh, here's another one that I could have, and so it's about getting streamlined from the beginning. The writing labs, the essay specialists who, every single one of them has been doing this for like, I think at least 4 or 5 years with us. And some of them have done it a lot longer, like me. Too long. Yeah, great.
Scott, can I ask you just a quick question? On because I know that like the UC prompts are out, Common App, personal essay, all that kind of thing. When we think about like the other private schools, just so I have a sense of timeline in my head, like when do all of their, like when would like the Cornell or the Emory or the UT Austin, like when would all of those schools generally have all their essay prompts up so you could do that?
Right. So what Greg is talking about is basically the what are called the supplements. And so if we go to a list of colleges right here, this is just like a list that I have here. I'll just pick Stanford, because it's an easy school. We look at this one here, and it says this is the Common App personal essay, which is the personal statement that we're talking about. Then it has 8 questions, and this is what you're talking about, Gregory. Like, when do these come out? These usually are on the Common App when the students are doing them in August, but sometimes you will click and it will say question not uploaded yet. And that means that you will have to, kind of keep checking in. But if we look here just to see what Stanford's are, just so that we can all get an understanding of what this is, you have short questions, which are like, what is the most significant challenge that faces society today? Supplements. How did you spend your last 2 summers? What historical moment or event do you wish you could have witnessed? Briefly elaborate on one of your extracurricular activities, a job you hold, or responsibilities you have for your family. Name one thing you are looking forward to experiencing at Stanford. That is just the super shorties. Then they also ask you to do these, which are about a little bit more than a quarter page. Reflect on an idea or experience that makes you genuinely excited about learning. This one here is called the letter to your future roommate essay. Tell us something meaningful that is something meaningful to you and why. So you can tell there's a lot of essays here, right? And it's like, oh gosh. So one of the things that we talk about when we build our college list is about the number of supplements. If we have too many supplements, this is, I always kind of bring this up that makes us all kind of go into shock. But if if we look here at like a tracking sheet that a lot of our students will be using, you guys will be using, you know, the students write in the number of supplements that each school has, and they will be able to track it, and they will be able to kind of cross them out as they go. But then also you see here, which is called Wave 2 list. These are the schools that the students like, Stanford's a pain in the neck. You see all those essays that were kind of totally different than all the other schools. And so that student is going to make a Wave 2 list. And a Wave 2 list means that these schools will not be even started until the student has finished all these other ones. So they may never get to the Wave 2 list. But those are schools that a student is going to kind of put on the back burner and then go through all these. It may be because it's like Stanford, that it has 8 supplements. But the good news is, because what Greg was basically saying is like, how do I timeline this? The true fact is, if you think about the summer being for just what I said, the personal statements, the UC, the applications, and the college list, that gives you, in a lot of cases, the raw material to knock out your supplements pretty efficiently. We'll be sending out like our YouTube, interviews with our essay specialists, where we all talk about the supplements and organizing them. And we keep doing things like that in addition to all the other stuff we do. But you'll realize that the majority of supplements are like patching together different pieces of other supplements. You tend to repurpose and refashion these essays. So if you've written your mainframe personal statement, your UC insight questions, and then you go to your supplements, because they don't see your UC questions, they're like, oh, that supplement is exactly like my UC question here. And then you bring it over, you manipulate it a little bit, and students become like, balloon time, making balloon animals with their essays by the end. It's like, like super fast. But if a student tries to do the supplements in the beginning, the supplements do not come out nearly as well. So I almost think it's almost a blessing in disguise that they're held back from the supplements in the beginning. Just kind of work on the bigger ones that take a lot more time. And the truth is, as some of my other occupation is I'm a writer in addition to Blue Train, and certain essays are, the long ones are like suspension bridges. They're very complex. It takes effort to really get through the middle portion where you don't lose your audience. You need something that constantly changes. So that is hard to do. That takes time. That takes invention. That takes structure. That takes, polish and editing and all those other things. The short essays are like planks across streams. They're not suspension bridges. They're just like, what are you trying to say? You try to come at it fast. 250 words in and out. They're pretty quick. And we have quick tricks to get those out and done. So we don't really want students stressing about those too much. We do want them, though, to clear their plate with the other stuff we're talking about. If we kind of go back here to the timeline. So we just talked about the workshops. And as I mentioned, the other workshops that, sorry, I'm jumping around here, everybody. But the other workshops that students will do, some students will do the college list building workshop. Some people are doing college list building with us one-on-one. I've already been doing a ton of, college list primers. So what a college list primer is because college list building requires a little bit more, experience than some other things that we do. Not everybody does it. So when we do college list building, it is at a higher rate than the other services. If you do it after July 15th, it's more expensive because we have people calling us from all over, just random non-Blue trainers like, hey, and then we get overwhelmed and we can't fit everybody in. So what we try to do is we try to encourage people to do instead of doing a 1-session college list building for 2 hours, if you're doing it privately, you do, for the same price, you do 2 hour-and-a-half sessions separated by a few weeks. This allows a student to really build a basic list, do some research on their own, come back, refine that list, and you get more for your money. So we encourage Blue trainers to think, if you're going to do it privately, you don't have to, but to do the 2-part before July 15th. You will save money, you will have a better experience, and the student will have more time. I understand APs are busy right now, so students like, Mom, get off that phone. I don't want to build a college list right now. We get it. But after that, you can. The other way to do it is, if you don't want to do it one-on-one, you can just come to the workshop, use one of your package hours, sit in. We have students come in from colleges, they talk online. These workshops are being done remotely, at least now. I know I want to see you guys too in person. Some of you, just kidding. But at the end of the day, what we realize is that the online format has worked really well for these workshops. And I'm not just saying that because most of this stuff is online focused. Online applications, the students are looking at the app on screen and they have their own app open and they're following as we go. And then the second half of the workshop, they all go into private rooms and the application specialists come in and go over all their different pieces of their application. Writing with students, we used to do it side by side. We'd both be looking at the computer. I personally find it so much better looking at their face, and we're both on Google Doc, and we're both able to, we have 2 keyboards are facing each other, and we're working on the doc at the same time. As I said before, I'm a writer. I have writing partners now, and when I work with them, we find that Zoom and working on a common document has been a game changer for us. And I think you ask any one of our essay specialists, we all thought it was great last year. So we're not really disappointed about workshops being online. We're going to offer some in person as soon as that becomes available, and people can do what they wish. But I do not think that it has been anything negative for these workshops. But the college list building one, then the Common App, the UC app, the Cal State app. Cal State and Coalition, don't really worry about those for now. If you do the UC and Common App, those are usually pretty easy to do on your own. It's pretty much, you've learned everything and you can just implement it over there. The next, next month, where we're going to be talking about are the, first of all, I don't know if you guys got our Save the Date Blue List party that we have. Every year for the last 17 years, we've had a Blue List release party. And that, last year was the first one we didn't do on purpose. We'd usually, in person, we'd usually have it at Clark Building in Hermosa. Usually have wine, cheese. It would be great. A lot of people would come. We'd have a big screen and we'd go over it. In the old days, we would hand out our I don't know if I have one now, our old Blue Lists, which were made out of cardboard. Now we've gone digital with it. But we still want to have a release party for 2 reasons. Because in the next month, we are working our butts off to improve it even more than it is right now. Every single month we're adding, new things to it. Like recently, we just added live cams. So, and also radio stations from all the colleges. Not all of them yet, they're all getting there, but we can go to, let's see, what time is it? A lot of these schools are probably dark right now, but let's see if we go to the live cam here. Yeah, see, look, we can just sit and we can watch people take pictures here. But what I notice is when I'm looking at these live cams and I'm listening to radio stations, I'm seeing weather, I'm seeing all the different, parts of the school. Each school has different, different types of webcams. But, we're also adding, for every single school, we're adding the study abroad programs, the honors programs, the club and activity sheet, the student blog page. Overviews will all be written by that time. You will have all the quick links to everything you need about the school. And so this is in addition to reaching out to all 230 colleges on this list and getting information from them, in addition to working with all the surveys that we have just completed with our students. And I hate to say it, changing the red zone GPAs, a lot of them ticked up a notch. So, that may go back down, but we want everybody to be safe, rather everyone be safe than sorry. So on, I think it's June 24th, we'll send out the reminder, but I think that's it. We will be having the, release party for all the new information, and we'll give a general rundown to teach everybody how to use it. So Cornell at night, so that we can really get give everyone an understanding of kind of the basics of how to use all these different tools, how to build a list, etc. But that's enough of Cornell at night. So before we go, let's see, is another question. Oh, it is cool, Dominic. I agree. You know what else is cool, Dominic? The radio stations, buddy. One of the things that I really like doing is I'll go every morning. I mean, now you can search radio station on the Blue List and it'll pop up all the schools that we've had a radio station for. Like this morning I was working, I was listening to University of Michigan, the students doing their show. Yesterday I was listening to University of New Hampshire doing their show. And you hear the way they talk, you hear the music they play. A lot of it's not what you'd expect. Some of it's not good. But at the end of the day, what we don't want people to do is build college lists based on stats. That is the reason why we're building our search engine different than the other search engines you see out there. Every other search engine is like percentage admitted, ranking of this, ranking of that. And students look at that and they go, okay, I don't really know what to know about this school. What we're trying to really do with all the YouTube videos is another thing. We just have everyone getting more videos and culling them out to the better ones. By the time students go through the school on the Blue List, we're hoping they understand the social life, the fit, the activity life. What are you doing with your time there? I'm starting to interview students at all these schools and putting the interviews on each school. So you'll see all those as well, questions, answers. And this is all focused for California students. So all the stats are specific. Hate to say it, to people on here that like Mark from Georgia. But this is mostly primarily it's primarily a Southern California search engine that we're building. But we'll be happy to show that to you guys in June. If you don't have a login credential, make sure to reach out to the office and get yours. And we're also going to be giving stuff away at the Blue List release party. People who show up will get a free Blue List membership to give to a friend. There's gonna be lots of different things. So put that on your calendar for next month. But until then, we'll be sending updates as everything goes. If you want to ask questions about your timeline, reach out to us. And now I'm just gonna shut up for a second and ask just open season. Does anyone have any questions about anything right now that I haven't already hit?
So thanks as always, Scott, for doing this. It's just awesome. And the question I have, we go back to sort of your learnings from the seniors on like what you saw, like, and I'm thinking about like what you said last month and this month, right? And particularly on the UCs, like the distribution was clearly like a little bit like Texas, right? We're just going to take the best kid from every high school in the state, and that means you may have gotten 10 kids into Berkeley before, now you're only getting 4. So I got that. From on the private out-of-state schools, like, and particularly kind of the test optional or like test blind, where you had sort of talked maybe the last 2 or 3 about they're coming back to kids going like, hey, can you send us your PSAT? Not, it's optional, but like, that kind of thing. And they were not having the data they had before. Obviously, like, maybe the AP exams were screwy last year. And so how did that play in? Like, any other lessons or any other sort of tidbits on trends you saw across how colleges were making decisions this time that may play into sort of how we think about our kids who are, the ones on here that are juniors for next year? Yeah,
I think, and thank you for being so attentive in these because it sounds like you've been keeping track. That's good. The bottom line is that we're still collecting surveys, so we're still learning. Something that we did notice is that certain schools were really friendly to California this year. Schools that like Virginia Tech, UT Austin, schools that were normally had high bars, and even UW dropped a little bit for some of our students. So we did see that there were some schools, and we're always going to alert you guys to those schools, like Virginia Tech for sure. Like we had a bunch of students getting in there with numbers that were not exceptional, and some other schools, University of Maryland. So the first thing is we want to kind of highlight schools that had like great schools, mind you, that just had kind of easier entrance bars this year. The majors, to be honest with you, Gregory, was a big deal. And I don't want to overstate it because I don't want people to be shy from things. But we do want to make sure that people are not just applying to impacted schools everywhere. Undeclareds did fine this year, but the problem with going undeclared is that if you really want a major, you may not get it once you're at the school. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So we really had to talk to a lot of families about, like, if I just kind of just bring up and I'll repeat this as we go. Anytime you're looking at your college list, you hit the little blue heart here. So this is just a student's college list, let's just say. So this student is, whatever their GPA is, we'll say that these are his or her reach, high target, low target, and safe schools. These schools up here, if that student is going to an impacted major, that's going to make these schools probably even less likely to happen. So we're really telling students to stay away from impacted majors in their reaches unless they would only go to that school if they got that major. So students are kind of, just like that spreadsheet I showed a moment ago. I took it off, but it showed a student that had communications, business, and psychology, and undeclared, all different depending on which school he or she was applying to. And that's not that student is scattered and doesn't know what they want. It's they know that certain schools are harder. They'd be happy with communications at this school. They'd be happy with psychology at that school, and they'd be willing to kind of find their way around. And what we realize is a lot of students learn a lot about themselves as they pick majors, as they decide how important that a major is, and then if they're accepted to schools under a major or undeclared, because they start to actually kind of realize what is important to them. So majors were a big deal. Certain schools were a big deal. There were certainly some out-of-state publics that wanted money, and they were kind of totally fine with Californians. We're seeing on the bad news front, a lot of those schools were more accepting, but they weren't necessarily throwing scholarships behind those acceptances. So it was win one, lose one in that situation. So applications, essays were very important. The students of ours that did well in our essay contest, even if we didn't know where they got accepted to or what their other stats were, did very well in their acceptances. So it just showed if we saw their essays as being superior and we didn't know anything else about their application, and then we took that knowledge that we knew that their essays were good and then looked at their track record of how well they did on their acceptances, we saw that there was an absolute connection between the best essays and the acceptances. So it just shows that the qualitative elements and the test scores did both play, I don't want to say an equal part, but they both played a pretty heavy part. And then the majors and activities were important. The one thing also with test scores, because you may take the tests and you may not, I want to go to Columbia, but I can't get a 33, or I ended up with a 31. Should I apply to Columbia with the test score? No. Columbia, I'll go test optional to. But all these other schools down here, I will send my scores to. So it's not only about going test optional or with test scores, it's which schools am I going to submit my scores to. So I think that is kind of important too. That just takes, when you send in your Common App, you send in all the schools that you want no test scores in one batch, and then you start to send the schools, and we'll teach the students and the families how to do that when it comes time. But this allows you to take the test without fear of having to submit it. or not submit it. Like you can pick and choose which schools that you want to go there. Also, we did see that, during COVID, again, to your point, Gregory, that activities, and this is something I've been harping on, maybe it's just because it's my philosophy in life, but the students who did things for genuine, stuff at home, even if it's taking care of grandma, even if it's, breeding their, fish or whatever they're doing, a lot of those little simple things really carried a lot of weight if they sounded interesting, if they showed a student had intellectual curiosity. So, we're always, that's the reason why I did that big pitch about investing in yourself and in your family, educationally for those things, because we see those things did carry weight this year. In previous years, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, that's cool that you are, hybridizing plants, but that's really not going to get you into Stanford. But this year we saw students who had more dynamic activities. Most of them were done from home or self-starting, did very well. So that would be something else I would kind of think about. And the more information we get, the more we're going to crystallize it, and the more we're going to kind of like bring it out. But someone said that's nice. Private colleges building, you sign up through the office, yes. Yeah, so, and then the last question said, someone asked if anyone, is it worth doing college visits right now? Yes. I think that it's always worth doing a college visit if you can. If you look at the news, it looks like some of the schools are actually doing visits. One of my students went to, I think, Northeastern, like a couple weeks ago. They were giving official tours, and that was, when it was still, a little bit murky on, the COVID restrictions. But in my experience, I think it's important that that students get an understanding of what they're working towards, and because if they don't, and if it's all just because it's some guy on Zoom and it's their parents and it's the world saying like, look, you need to make money, all that stuff starts to add up to like, right? We want to get it to be something where it adds up to being like exciting. We want the student to walk across a campus and go, hell yeah, I want to go here. Matter of fact, I'll tell you, one of my students, she is a senior. She got accepted to a handful of schools, that she got accepted to a lot of schools, but she got accepted to a handful that she was actually interested in. And she went to go visit them. And, I'll just, say that they were all good schools. And she had a bias before she went. She thought that she was going to like one school the least and the other two more. Completely flipped around on her. She loved the school that she thought she wasn't even going to like, and she literally came home that day and committed to the school. She's like, I looked around. She's like, I felt like they were my people. I'm like, that's great. And that's kind of the way you're going to feel, because everyone thinks it's like this mythical beast to walk onto a campus and feel it. It's not. A lot of students will walk onto a campus, even if they've been to 10 before, and they're like, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Then they go to one, they're like, oh yeah, I really do like that. So we always want that to happen, because if that does happen, that makes the rest of the process so much easier. It makes everything, the parents not pushing, the student knows why they're doing this. They want to work for it. They're like, no, mom, I want to test again. We'll talk about all these things another time, but yeah, go and visit schools if you can. But the very last thing I'll say before I throw my smoke bomb and disappear is that it's important that that we understand that students are under pressure right now with their APs, with their upcoming finals, and that's one of the reasons why I put that little guilt trip in the thing today. I was like, if you're a good parent, you'll come and like take the pressure off them. So that was mainly because we want to send the students the signals that they can kind of wear blinders and earplugs right now. They can just focus on what they need to focus on. They're going to be digging themselves through the summer soon enough. And we are also going to encourage everyone to take a couple of weeks off during the summer. And we're also going to try to make the summer as streamlined as possible. Do your applications on a single day, each application. Just get it done. Start your essay early. Get it done. Get these things sharp and ready. And this isn't the first summer doing this, so I promise you we'll all get there. Any last final question? No more? All right, guys. Thank you for listening over the time. Always appreciated. We'll send out some updates soon. Always good to see all your faces. And we'll be having 2 next month because we'll have the town hall, which will be hopefully shorter. And then we'll have the Blue List release party where we'll get all you guys what you need. Okay. All right. Until then, see you guys next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Uh,
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.